In February and March of 2026, I'll be back on the road in Hull, Gateshead, Derby, and in Colchester. 2026 is when they want to cross the line as fast as they can into an AI-controlled humanity. We stand up now or we regret it forever. That's 4 dates, and you can get the tickets in the link below.
I don't believe there's a God, by the way. I'm atheist.
Well, I think there is a higher power, and that we are actually outside of our manipulated sense of inferiority and limitation. We are actually an expression of it. But the whole point of the perceptional trap is to give you a totally fake identity. See, we're not human. We are consciousness having a brief human experience. We're not actually human. We're consciousness in our true I, infinite state. So what the religions have done is, and this takes us into this whole area of how do the few control the many. First of all, you have to get the many to have rigid, unquestioning belief systems. Essential. And the more the merrier. I've said many times, this cult and its masters couldn't care less what you believe as long as you believe it rigidly and will not question it. So there's your religions for a start. But a religion, what my father used to call bricks and mortar religion, synagogues and churches and mosques and temples, that's actually, we call it a religion, but it's actually a mentality.
A belief system.
Yeah. And then you go to orthodox science, which is kind of antagonistic to religion. But what's orthodox science? Mentality. It's a bloody religion. The orthodox books of science, they're the holy books of science. If you go outside of them, oh my God, pseudoscience. And if you look at the history of science, it's had to be pulled kicking and screaming all the time from resisting new information to bring it to where it is today, and it's still orthodoxy. And then you've got things like the human caused climate change belief system. That too is a religion that rejects all borders that actually question it. And every single one of these things has a blasphemer. If you go against human caused climate change, you are, which when you look at it, hello, intelligent life calling planet Earth, have a look at it. You are a blasphemer to the belief system. If you are a scientist, and there are many, often working underfunded, who are challenging scientific orthodoxy, they are blasphemers. They are pseudoscientists. And then, of course, you've got the classic blasphemers in religion. And what I do in the one example. First of all, where do these belief systems come from? Where do these religious belief systems come from? It's estimated that of the so-called 8 billion people in the world, 5.4 billion identify as either Christian, Muslim, or Hindu. Okay, so where do the overwhelming majority of Hindus come from? They come from the Indian subcontinent or from Hindu families in other countries. Where do most Muslims come from? They come from the Middle East, or they come from Muslim families in other countries. Where do most Christians come from? You look at the southern states of America, etc., where the Christians come from. Now, if these people were born, say the Christian was born, I've got the truth, in the Middle East, would they still be a Christian? No, they'd be a bloody Muslim almost certainly. Same with the Hindus and everything. In other words, these belief systems have not come, some cases, but rare, they've not come from, I'm going to look at all the evidence and I'm going to come to my own conclusions. They've come from your upbringing, your programming, and also the pressure from parents and peers that say, oh, no, you can't go against the Islamic religion, or you can't go against the Christian religion, all that stuff. And so you ask then where they come from, these stories. And what I kind of show in the book is that the Old Testament of the Bible, which is supposed to be the word of God, I mean, don't have a laugh. It's the word of humans, and it's nonsense. You look at something like Moses or Exodus, and there's absolutely no evidence that any of it ever happened. And two of the people I quote in the book are Jewish archaeologists.
Are you telling me Moses didn't part the sea?
No, God parted the sea.
Going to ruin that illusion for me.
Yeah, God parted the sea and also sorted the wet sand out when they went across.
What about Jonah living in the wild? Did that not happen?
Probably not, if I'm honest.
Okay, well, you've killed that for me.
These Jewish archaeologists obviously have no input or interest in trashing the story. But being archaeologists, they've looked at the archaeological evidence and they've said there ain't any, right? So what's supposed to have happened is all these plagues were sent by God on all the Egyptians, including the kids, what they'd done wrong, who knows? Ask God, I suppose. And then the Israelites left. And according to the Bible, they were 600,000 men. Right, okay, gotcha. So now we had the women, now we had the kids, and now we had all the animals they took with them. And they fled overnight from the Pharaoh.
And the wild that Jonah was living in.
Yeah, him. And so
him.
So you got, I mean, how did it happen? And of course the Egyptians, like the Romans, were extremely extreme chroniclers and recorders of their time. No mention of these plagues, no mention of this. What you add it all together, it's about 2 million people leaving overnight across God opened the Red Sea. Then they'd spend 40 years going around a desert, right? In what is southern Israel now. And you can go round it in a car in 2 days, or a day maybe, if you go fast in that area. And there's 2 million people going round for 40 years in this desert. There is no archaeological evidence of any graves, of any bones, of any animal bones, nothing. There's no evidence of any of it ever happening. And then you look at the Abraham story and these other stories, okay? And there's no evidence worth the name that stands the test of credibility that there was a King David or there was a King Solomon or any of it, right? And what I kind of show in the book is these stories came from Mesopotamia, the land of Sumer and Babylon and Assyria. That's where they came from. And then they were symbolic stories. You have the Noah and the biblical Old Testament story of Noah and the Great Flood. Well, you go back thousands of years to the Sumerian tablets, the cuneiform tablets, and they're describing the Great Flood. They're just, instead of Noah, it's some other hero of the flood, and they, God and the boat and all that stuff. What they've done long after it's supposed to have happened, like centuries after Moses is supposed to have existed, centuries after David is supposed to have existed, that's when these Old Testament texts were written, right? So then you come to Christianity, and what I'm saying in the book there is, and I'm quoting people who from several books who've come to the same conclusions, that the Gospels, outside of which there's no evidence of Jesus for a start, outside of the Gospel stories of the biblical Jesus anyway, that the Romans wanted to replace the Jewish Messiah belief system, which had their Messiah as a war leader. The Messiah was going to come back, and he was going to lead us into battle against the Romans.
What have the Romans ever done for us?
Yeah, exactly. And that's a great film. That was.
Unbelievable. I'm so tempted to ask you about that, but you're on a roll.
That's a great film, Life of Brian.
Unbelievable.
And so they wrote the Gospels, and I'll tell you what they were connected to in a sec, because they wanted to replace the aggressive, warlike Messiah they believed in with a Messiah that was pacifist and that already come and gone, right?
A very naughty boy?
Say again?
A very naughty boy?
Yeah, exactly. And then, so they wrote the Gospels, and what happened is that the Romans went to war with the Jews and the Jewish rebels, and they destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD, and then they won the final battle at a place called Masada, where I went once, in 73 AD. And that whole campaign, which was led by a guy called Titus, who was a Flavian, he eventually became the emperor of Rome. His father, Vespasian, started the battle against the Jews, and then he became emperor of Rome, followed by his son. A guy called Josephus, who is not who history records him as I point out in the book, he wrote a history of the campaign of Titus defeating the Jews and taking over that whole area. And it was called the Wars of the Jews. But Josephus and another group of chroniclers working under pseudonyms wrote the Gospels. And they wrote the Gospels, and after the Titus campaign, which is why people say, oh, the Gospels were written in this period, which was that period. And they put the story of Jesus into an earlier period, starting in, it ended in 33 AD or whatever. And they put it in an earlier period, which meant that the battles and the war with the Jews had already taken place. And they added things I point out in the book where Jesus is making prophecies of the end of Jerusalem and all that stuff. But it had already happened by the time they wrote those stories and put them in an earlier context. The other thing that they did, it's a technique called typology.
Where did Muhammad come into all of this?
Well, I'm going to come to that. Oh, yeah, because that's part of it. And so what they wanted was to make the Christian religion through the Gospels and whatever to appear to be an outgrowth of what we call the Old Testament texts. So they tried to make prophecies of Moses, didn't exist, prophecies of Moses, appear to be the prophecy of the coming of Jesus. And it's called typology. It's you add a new story, but you make it appear to be a continuation of an old story, right? And that's why you've got the Bible with the Old Testament and the New Testament, and Christians think both are true, right? So you had that, and then you write the epistles of St. Paul, and in the book again I show that that's just not true, and some scholars believe absolutely it wasn't true. The epistles of Paul were almost certainly written by a guy called Pliny the Younger, who was part of this Roman network, And he is famous in traditional history for writing lots and lots of letters. And the St. Paul letters were basically written by him. And it was all part of this creating this illusion of a new religion. So this Flavian dynasty was behind the creation of Christianity originally. And then sometime later, in the 320s AD, came along a dynasty which were known as Neo-Flavians because they all had Flavian in their names. And one of them was Constantine the Great. And Constantine the Great is acknowledged by Christianity as being one of the founders of what we call Christianity today. And he made Christianity the state religion of Rome. And he oversaw something called the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD in what is now Turkey. And the Nicene Creed, which is what Christians are supposed to believe to this day to be a Christian, was decided at that Council of Nicaea. What then happened is his mother, Constantine the Great. Oh, and by the way, there's a statue of Constantine the Great outside of York Minster, the cathedral at York Minster, because it acknowledges him as a great founder of Christianity. So his mother, Helena, is then dispatched in 326 AD to the Holy Land, 300 years after Jesus is supposed to have lived. And she, miraculously, but there miracles happen, found the three crosses, right? 300 years later. And she wanted to know which was the cross that Jesus died on. And so they got this lady who was supposed to have been dying of a deadly disease, and they got her to touch the crosses. This is the official story, right? So she touches one cross, nothing happens. She touches the next cross, and he's miraculously kind of healed. That's the cross that Jesus died on. She also found the tunic in which he was wearing at the time of the crucifixion, 300 years later. And then Constantine the Great, on a Roman pagan site of worship, built the Jerusalem Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is claimed to be the tomb of Jesus and the place where he was crucified. And Christians still go today, and they think that's true. When it was decided by Helena, who also found the three crosses and the tunic, etc., and decided that this is where it happened. And what it is if you keep telling the story over and over and over again, eventually your sense of it is it's historical. This is what happened. But if you just stop and say, well, I'm going to have a look at this and I'm going to see what evidence it's based upon, then suddenly you realize it's based on nothing. I mean, you look at the stories of Jesus. There's no eyewitness accounts that we see. They're all written much later. Just as the obviously no eyewitness accounts of the Old Testament stories. They were written much later, and they were written by humans for human reasons. And then you come into Islam, which is supposed to be based on the experiences of Muhammad, who is said to have died in 632 AD. Now, a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the characters in the Quran and Islamic belief are the same as Christianity and the same as Judaism and the Old Testament. So just as you have the typology of the Christian story linking into that, or appearing to, so you have the story of Islam linking into the Christian story and linking into the Old Testament story. And if you go back to the basis of all three, there's no evidence at all that any of it ever fucking happened, and the evidence is overwhelming that it actually came out of stories from Mesopotamia, not Judea and what we now call Israel. So a lot of people don't realize that Islam believes in so many characters in the Bible, New Testament and Old Testament. It first of all believes in Jesus. It says he wasn't divine, he wasn't the last prophet. Muhammad was. And they believe in Moses. They believe in Mother Mary. They believe in Abraham. Abraham's a big guy in Islam, Mecca, etc. And all these people that there's no evidence for, Islam believes in, just like Christianity believes in it. And then you see the same recurring story. You see that the life story biography of Muhammad was written long after he's supposed to have lived. And the Quran that we know today was compiled long after the events are supposed to have happened. And, it's based upon the fact that Muhammad had a dream, and he had a dream of being with the angel Gabriel, which is a Christian and Judaistic figure, same. And he was taken on this steed with wings to Jerusalem, and then he was taken to Allah, and he was given the Quran. And the thing is that, God seems to be, the God that we're talking about seems to be really lax in getting the truth across. So no one knows who wrote the Gospels. You say to a Christian, you believe in Jesus, you believe in this, you believe in that. Yeah, okay, fine, that's fine. I have no problem. Believe what you like. None of my business. But who wrote the Gospels then? Who wrote the Bible? Silence. Well, why haven't you asked? And because you take beliefs off the peg. And I guess if you're in the southern states of America or in the Middle East or in a Hindu arena, it's kind of better just to stay in line because your mum and dad won't like it. Just believe it.
If you want to read more and watch more of my content, then go to the description under the video where you can buy my books. The latest one is The Roadmap, where you can get tickets for public events, and how you can subscribe to a fantastic video channel called Iconic, iconic.com.